Hello and welcome to the Nitro RX podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Team Albers Daily, and joining me, as always, is my brilliant co-host, the one and only Nabila Tejba. How are you?
I'm doing all right. A little bit sleepy this morning, but getting there. How about you?
I can relate to that, although I feel like that's been the last insert number of weeks here, and just continue carry the number over because I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And that is kind of why we're back a little bit later than usual. We've just had a lot going on. But we are worth the wait. I've heard many people say this, and not just myself to myself. So it's all good. And we're going to review the latest round of Nitrocross that was, at this point, I think held a couple of weeks ago over in Phoenix. And I'm going to come straight to you, Nabila. Initial thoughts, because there was a big gap from Solo City to here, or it felt like one at least. And then we've also had 2 weeks to digest it all. So refresh the memory a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. We've been MIA for a little while. Just been catching bits and bobs as we can. Interesting round. Have to say it probably didn't fare up as some of the other rounds do, but I think we've come to expect so much all the time that when we get a little bit of a lackluster week, we're like, oh, it wasn't as interesting. But that's all championships. We're really bad to say that that's like a problem with Nitro because let's be real, it wasn't fun watching Max Verstappen win every single week in F1, was it?
No, I was gonna. You were reading my mind a little bit there. It's like compared to other motorsport series this year, we've had quite a good time of it. And I think, like
Mhm.
you were saying here, this was going to be inevitable at some point from Nitrocross. It wasn't a bad round by any stretch of the imagination, but it just wasn't knocking it out of the park. It was just it's Nitrocross. It's entertaining. It's good. But we've just been treated too nicely up to this point that it was all there was always going to be a point, and I don't know if I'm glad it's happened now, and then we can potentially go back to business as normal for the next round or what. But it was what it was, and at least, like you say, it wasn't just the same driver in all of the categories somehow winning every
Mhm.
race, every heat, every semi-final, every last chance qualifier, and every final. So we had something at least. And we do have a small bit of news, and I say small because I really did eat some of it out of the world of Nitrocross. As we can tell from this first point here, really, is there were slightly updated, smoother graphics for the TV coverage, which I know is really grasping at some straws here, but I like that they're at least paying attention to the little things on that scene, and it did
Mhm.
seem slicker and it did seem nicer, and as we have seen with Formula One over the years, it does make a difference. And it's nice to be able to read everything a bit clearer now, I think, on the side. We've had that with some series where they just go for years, like Formula E. If I'm not standing right in front of the screen, good luck reading where anyone is half the time. So at least with this one, everything's nice and clear and bold, and there's not too many cars in the races anyway. So it's all just very easy to follow. And I think you need that when you're still a relatively young series trying to establish yourself.
I agree. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is not being able to understand it. Like I watched an IndyCar race one time and they have it all going through the top. It is impossible
Mhm.
to know where anyone is at any one given time because you get to the 16, 17 and you've forgotten who's 1 to 10 already. So
And they keep
I really
rotating the
think,
bottom 10 over and over.
mhm.
I hadn't finished reading that yet.
Yeah. And I think for me, that type of thing is actually key. If I can't keep up and I can't follow with what's going on, and I can't just have looked down at my phone to look at something and then look back up and know exactly where I'm at, that bothers me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like you say, it's key for people who, like you and I think you can say at this point we give enough of a toss about this sport. But for new people coming in, if you can't see that straight away, you're not going to know who the hell anyone is, who to follow,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. So little thing, but I appreciate it. But it wasn't the only thing that Phoenix changed, was it?
No, they had a modified track since last year. This year, they started it out with a jump into the arena, and the cars had to stay in their lanes until they land in the arena. That's weird because Nitro is a whole lot of mishmash. We're going to go wherever we want kind of thing, obviously within reason, because obviously you get a penalty if you went out of the track, but you know what I mean. Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
very untoward to have to stay in your lane, for lack of better
Yeah,
words.
it's I was glad it was only applicable to the start of the race, at least, because, like you say, otherwise you're like, yeah, you can do craziness, but then you get back to here and you're like, no, no, formation, stay in line. It's like I think they just wanted to make sure that it makes sense for reason, but it's still a curious thing to see there, which I think I preferred the track as it was last year. But like you say, it's you stay in formation and it looks very nice, but it's I think the reason they implemented it is because you could see easily have them all drive into each other immediately and not even make it into the track as such. And then that's everyone's race is over pretty much straight away, which I'm kind of surprised that didn't happen anyway, just because, especially when
Mhm.
you look at some of the other categories where there's more cars, or even the final for Group E, it's just begging to happen. Somehow it was avoided, but it was a little odd. But I think, again, I like that they tried something, but I don't think it hit the nail on the head.
I agree. But also, I think I just kind of want to throw that out there. If you're listening, let us know in our Instagram what you thought of the new track setup. Did you have a preference of last year's Phoenix like Thiemo? Or did you like how they started it this year? Personally, for me, it was just a little bit odd because it's just not normal. Do you know what I mean? Like, we threw in so many weird things with staying in your lane, which is not traditional Nitro cross. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just a bit weird for me.
And then we also had a shorter Joker lap than normal this time around, which was just bizarre because you're like, no, no, the whole point of the Joker lap is that it's longer. So it was weird because then you'll think I was every race I was watching, I kept forgetting which one the Joker lap was because I kept seeing them fly off, and I'm like, oh, they're going on the longer route. Oh no, that's actually the track. Never mind. Sorry, just jarring. And again they're trying something out, a bit different, but I think stick to the longer ones. You have some that are a bit too long, I think, that don't always hit and miss. I'm thinking, where was it? Maybe Calgary last year, where they had really long one that went under a bridge and you just about came up around like halfway around, and it had a couple of close moments, but for the whole, you're like, yeah, no, you're screwed. You're not going to get that time back. Whereas this one, they went too much in the opposite direction. But again, if they're trying something, leave them to it, but just don't do that again.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we had a little bit more fun news. We had Brian Deegan, father of Haley Deegan, the racing driver for the Americans who know racing very well out here, who joined Nitrocross this weekend. So that was a fun little different debut. What were your thoughts?
Always like to see fresh blood in Nitrocross and see people jumping in and out. I don't know if he's going to come back, how long this is for, but he probably wished he'd had a better weekend. But again, I think that's just inevitable when you come into a new category, you're kind of thrown into the deep end. And as long as he doesn't do a Jensen Button and just leave immediately and be like, nope, I can't do this, then be fun to see what he could do moving on. Because, like you say, he's got motorsport is running in the family there. Be fun to bring Haley in as well and just have that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. We've not really, I don't think we've had that yet. We've had brothers and maybe cousins in there, but we haven't had, and we have like nearly the whole family with the blocks coming in now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think we've had a father-daughter combo just yet, so that would be quite fun to see. It's just a let's tick that off the bingo card.
Absolutely. But it was pretty fun. Well, I guess for lack of understand, oh, well, it was kind of really not the most entertaining news, was it? We've had better, but
No, we have had
we're
better
here to
news.
cover everything off, and now we should probably get into the rounds.
Yes, so we're going to start off with the Baja bugs this time around because we did have four categories going around this Phoenix circuit, and it was two rounds over the course of the weekend because of how they're doing everything this year. So whilst we only really got two races out of most of the categories, I thought instead of jumping back and forth all the time, let's just tackle the smaller categories in one go, pick them off, and then we can just dive into Group E at the end where there's a bit more meat on the bone there. And Baja Bugs was entertaining. I don't think it's the track that was potentially best suited to them, but it did spark up some fun battling, at least in the beginning of round four, as Rodriguez and Wilkie were battling closely throughout the race and in quite distinguishing liveries as well, because you had a very Herbie-esque car versus a blue car with light blue, and I don't think it was a lunchbox on the roof, but it was the only thing it reminded me of. And again, Nitrocross Baja Bugs, it genuinely could have been. It looked like one of those old metal lunchboxes that you used to see back in the 80s and 90s, which again, it wouldn't surprise me. It's just that's the identifying feature there. And it was an entertaining little battle there, and that's all that can be really said about it. It was just good entertainment. The crowd was quite amusing actually. They seemed to go quite wild for both rounds, more so than they did for some of the other racing, which you've got to love that in some ways.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think the Baja Bugs are almost a comic relief for the weekends. Like they do bring that element of fun. They're really they're entertaining. There's no like if you went to a race and you saw this, you'd just be like, seriously, we're racing these. But it's
And
some
so
really,
many of them.
really fun racing. Yeah. And I think it's definitely quite clear to see that Rodriguez and Wilkie are pretty much the ones to beat in this category now after every week that we've had. We're always up two or three. And even when they're having problems, they're still managing to come back. I know Wilkie didn't have a great race where everything kind of got destroyed in one of the rounds, but they really are the ones to beat. So it's pretty steady. But what's really nice is we're still having up to like 8 people in this category. Like it's not diminishing just because the same people are kind of in those top three. People are still really enjoying it. They're still coming. They're still getting out there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when this race would have happened. I think it might have been a week after the round because we're obviously a bit late to things. But confusing things come from you hear about endurance racing all the time. You've got like 4 hours of Spa, 6 hours of Monza, 24 hours of Le Mans,
Mm-hmm.
and some of these drivers were about to enter the 2.5 hours of wherever it was, and that's in these Baja bugs. That's I kind of want to go and see that because that's a different kind of endurance racing. I love that it's not 2 hours. 3 hours is too much. 2.5. That's what we're going to go for here. I liked that. It was very Baja bugs. But yeah, there wasn't too much else to report from round four there. Round five essentially saw Rodriguez win again, and it was just P2 and P3 that swapped around with Zirkus there getting into P2 ahead of Wilkie in P3. And the one interesting thing about that was that Travis Pastrana was in the comms box with Coley, and we know he likes to bet, Travis, and we know he's not very good at winning said bets. If we're going to go back to last year with Ben Mayer, and for some
Mm-hmm.
reason he had made a bet with Jim York that if he rolled during the race, he would get to slap Travis Pastrana, and if he didn't, then Travis would get to slap him. And you'd think that would be a weird thing to predict for yourself. Surely you'd expect that the other way around because you don't want to bet on yourself to roll the car because that's never a fun thing to do, and you don't really want to do that deliberately. And if it was deliberate, it was the kind of worst deliberate roll I've seen because it was very slow motion. I mean, they're slow anyway with these cars, but it was even slower than you could have thought it would be, and just kind of went onto his side and prompted rather Travis to debate does that count as a roll or not? I'm like, yes, you just don't want to get slapped because this is a weird bet that's now actually come true because you just don't do well when you come to betting. Don't take him to Vegas.
Yeah, I think that's kind of funny because I'm always going to sit there and go, did he do it on purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And just try to have like the least possible damage or like the least possible issues as possible. I'm losing the right thing. I know exactly what I want to say, but I'm really struggling today. So I apologize, guys.
That is, that is all right. I say it's not promising as well, considering that we now know where the last round of Nitrocross is going to take place next year, which is Las Vegas. Um, so that's potentially not going to go well for Travis on and off track,
Gonna
regardless of
find
the
out, aren't
category.
we? Who
Yeah, I mean,
knows?
maybe you'll double down, and it's kind of like when you strap a piece of toast onto a cat and toss it into the air, it kind of just fixes itself and creates a vacuum. Um, it might just be bad luck, and bad luck means that he'll get lucky there. Who knows? But it was like you say, it was good comic relief. The crowd went wild for it, and there's not much else to report on that one. So
No, I think it was pretty level-headed in the NRX next category as well, really. We got Jansen winning for Carla, and nice to see Block having a solid weekend where she ended up on the podium because I know
yeah,
she's had some close ones. She's been really, really, really close. And then
so
she's
first
just
time on
had
the
some
podium as
bad
well, I
luck.
think, in that first race, and then she
Mm-hmm.
just, like you say, bad luck, and then does the double.
Yeah. And I think that's what we've been wanting to see. We kept saying, like, it's there. It was really there for her. It's been there. And now she's done it. Sometimes you just don't have good luck, though. And I think Block's kind of having what Travis is having in the group E category. Just there, but just something's not going right and then ending kind of like 4 or 5. So it's not even like she's far off the podium in the beginning. It's just
Oh.
she's not managed to just kind of cross that line. But really nice to see that she's did it both times this time. I'm quite
And
happy
the
for
and the
that
first time
because
very nearly didn't even happen because she was tantalizingly close to the walls on several occasions. Like, please don't throw it away now. You're this close to getting on the podium. I mean, yes, you nearly took the P2 away from Michaela, but don't just it's okay if you don't get it. Just focus on the point. You get P2 later. It's fine. Don't mess it
Hmm.
up now because we saw what happens in Group E when you try and push it last minute and it does not go well. So I'm glad that it was flirting, but it wasn't too much.
Exactly. But other than that, pretty smooth sailing for that category.
Yeah, and good to see friend of the podcast Jimmy Henson back on the podium there because he was down in P5 for the first race, but managed to bump himself up back onto the podium for the second one. So we always like to see that. And
Mm.
now I think I'm going to have to see if there's any Eric Gordon T-shirts so I can support him because he just does not have good luck at any point over any of the races. It would seem from this since we started this podcast. So maybe I need to
Hmm.
apply tough love there and just go right. Let's start an Eric Gordon fan club and see what happens. But then we also had the personal favorite of mine, the SXS category, which had at least 10 drivers in at any one time, which is always good fun because you just know that even if the racing isn't going to be top notch, it's going to be a little bit chaotic just because there's so many of them around the place. And we did kind of get chaos, to be honest. But in the kind of very measured way that was across the board this weekend, it was a lot of measured and mature driving, like you were saying above earlier, and detailing, but nothing knocking it out the park. But again, we got a slightly different podium here and there, so that was the main thing there. We had Baker winning in the first round, Pastrana winning in the second, and then Remery's got on the podium twice. Baker was in P2 for the second race, and Gray Ledbetter managed to get her podium on the first race as well. So that was nice to see as well. And a lot more women in this round than I think we've potentially had before as well, because we had her, we had Amanda Sorensen, we had Letitia Buffoni, and no, that's it. But again, just nice to see because it's now just very normalized within that category at the very
Hmm.
least. And then coming up, we've obviously got Leah in the next category, so it's nice to see that.
Yeah, it's awesome having the family come out and nice to see Maya back in. What's so funny about this to me though is like Pastrana, you're in Group E. Do you really need to be here? Obviously, he didn't obviously have a great first round, but he won the second one.
Yeah,
I
no,
know
Jimmy,
it's just a bit of a laugh, but sometimes I'm like, let them race
well,
without
it's yeah,
you.
you
Yeah,
do wonder, don't you? Just does he need to be there? Probably not. He wants to be there, and you
yeah.
always come back to that question of how much of an advantage does he give himself knowledge wise by okay, you're in a different vehicle for this race, but you
Hmm.
doing this is kind of fun, but also trying to get one up on the drivers for when you're in Group E later. Um, or does he just not think that way and he's not taking it anywhere near as seriously as I am?
I genuinely don't think he thinks that way. I genuinely just
Yeah,
think
probably.
for him, he's one of those people who just enjoys himself, has a little bit of a laugh, and goes out and has fun with the rest of them. And it's really nice to see that this category has so many people. I think it's important to see these categories with like all of these different people. And it's nice. I think it's one of those categories. It's not quite as it's entertaining, obviously. That's not why I'm in here. But you know what I mean? Like the Baja Bugs is just that fun comic relief. This is still pretty solid racing,
Yeah, I
if
think
that makes sense.
if you
I
look at
feel like I'm
the
shooting
next
myself in the foot.
no, I'm going to save you here. Don't worry. I think if you have the next category as like the feeder into the Group E, and you have the Baja Bugs as the comic relief, the SXS is kind of the blend of the two, where it's good fun, but there's serious hard racing, and you've got the most drivers in there all the time because you don't
Mhm.
really you only see the finals on the broadcast anyway. So however they decide the grids and whatnot, different matter entirely. But you've got that nice element of a little bit of everything there, and also the benefit
Mhm.
of having a driver with one of my favorite names in motorsport, in Dave Cowboy Cerrone. So you can't really go wrong with that.
No,
It's
you
very
can't. It's
nitro,
just yeah. And that leads us swiftly into Group E, the main category for the weekend.
and I get more knowledge on how this bloody point system works because I still don't have any information on that. But I found out that you get 15 points if you become top qualifier. So you don't just get a sticky, you do
Oh,
get points for it. And that is quite amusing when you think about Formula 2, you get 1 point for pole position. And here you are, 15, go for it. Have fun with that.
fair. That would make sense as to why the points end up astronomically high very quickly. Because I've
Yeah, because
always
we do
sat there
wonder about
going,
that from like
how
the
will we
Friday to
get
the Saturday.
100?
Like, how did you do this? And then, yeah, it's
Yeah,
15 straight away just for starting on the front row. Never mind if you finish a race.
that's weird, isn't it? Or is
So
that just me?
15 points for top qualifier, third place in Formula One for finishing a Grand Prix, 15 points.
Right. It just
So,
seems a strange points allocation here, Nitro. I think you need to streamline some points here. Like streamline the
or at
structure
least tell me
because
how you do it. Because this is, I keep finding bits of information. I need to get my wall back out and just start getting more sticky notes on them, trying to figure that out because there's too much maths. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
it's really funny because obviously that TikTok trend going around right now is like girl math or this math. This is legitimately Nitro math. And
You said
Nitro
this is
math
distinctly in its own
is not
category.
mathing. Yeah. It's not mathing. The maths doesn't math.
This is using numbers you pluck from thin air, calculate this. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of business as normal with the semi-finals. Larson winning the first one, Pastrana winning the second one. The second semi-final had a little bit more action to it, with Kevin Eriksson and Andreas Backward coming together on the final quarter of the lap after making contact on the merge, which is where the joke lap came into its own and being interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and Backward hit some tires, spun around, and Ericsson pretty much just drove into him, smashing them both out the race. And that's kind of how Pastrana got into the win there because he was kind of lagging behind a little bit and just sneaked on by and claimed the win there, which I think that's half the racing anyway. You just got to be in the right place at the right time. But it was just such a shame to see Ericsson backwards take each other out like that because it was some very nice close racing and then just got a bit too close.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that Bakker didn't have that problem since he ended up third in the final. But it's definitely like, as in when he had his accident, he didn't end up having
Yeah,
too
it
much
wasn't
problems
so
to
much of a
be.
smash. It
But
was a little smash.
yes, yes. Sorry, guys. As I said, I'm struggling today. Um, Interesting weekend, I think, all around. It's nice to see Bakker still being consistent. Not nice to see Ericsson not being consistent because both of them have been consistent. And now
If
it's
it
just
makes
kind
you
of,
feel any better, he's still perfectly all right. I think if I've got the right Ericsson, he does all checks. Yes, I do. He's still perfectly fine in the championship, so it's not done too bad, too much damage to it.
okay. Definitely weird not seeing Larson. Larson? His name's
Yeah,
Larson.
yeah. I mean, he won his semi final, but again, when it comes to the final, just was not there on the podium at all. P4s are still not
Mhm.
bad, but again, you're so used to him seeing on the podium or if not winning that you're like, what the hell are you doing P4? What's wrong with you?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it's nice to see that everything's kind of like mixing up a little bit. And McConnell P2, a little bit of a throw
Hmm.
out there, a little bit different.
And he had a tumultuous time up to that point anyway, because he'd had three crashes already that day. So it's like, I'm just amazed you got to the final. Never mind that you got onto the podium in second place.
Right.
You were talking about bad luck earlier, though, about there's Travis
Yes.
Pastrana bad luck and there's potential other bad luck. And then there is unfortunately Conor Martel, who I don't know what we
Oi, oi,
need to
oi.
do. Again, I put up the clip on the social media pages about having to perform an exorcism, and everyone liked that. But I'm genuinely thinking we're going to have to look at this as a serious option now because another DNF, and you just got a feel for the boy.
He, I, I don't have words sometimes to put into context how I feel
So
about
pretty
how
much
much
started
bad
that
luck someone
sentence
can
without
have.
knowing where that was going.
Yeah, it's like it just can't go right. Like nothing ever aligns. Like backward, he can go smack some tires, P3. But
Connell
Martell,
crashes three
you do
times,
anything.
P2 in the final. Martel doesn't matter.
Exactly. But yeah, it's just I feel for him. I really do. And I hope one day we're gonna be saying, woo, he won.
Yeah, he's kind
Hopefully.
of
But
he's kind of taken on the role of Ollie Bennett, who wasn't here because of the injury this weekend, but he's
mm,
taken on the role of come on, Bennett, let's go for it this time. And he's still taken that personally and wanted an even worse record for it now. And it's like, no, that wasn't a dare to do even worse. But we want you to do better. It's not. That's the opposite of what we wanted.
yeah. And I do wonder if obviously I don't actually believe this, but it'd be funny if Pastrana was P1 because of him doing the SSX
You got it
category
this time.
for before jumping into the Group E car,
Well, yeah,
cheating
that's where
that
my conspiracy theory was coming earlier. It's like just getting some practice in, so you're just getting a feel for it all a bit more. I mean,
we're
it
just
didn't.
messing though, I promise.
Yeah, I mean, it worked on that day, didn't work for the second day. So yeah. But we did actually get something interesting to happen on the final lap, which is weird to say that anyway, because normally it's always pretty interesting from start to finish. But it was just a pretty bog standard, he says, for Nitrocross race, where Kevin Eriksson went for the lead with 1.7 seconds covering the top four, and promptly got thrown up onto the banking in the gap between the gap jump. Everyone else already kind of driving into everyone else and somehow making it through. And that is where Travis came along again, copy and pasted me from early day to steep pass and took the lead. So that is how we ended up winning that one. But it was just again a case of you got that close on the last lap,
Hmm.
final kind of quarter of it, and yeah, it turns out you don't drive up the banking on the gap jump. That's not how you win the race there. I'm not a racing driver, but I figured that one out pretty soon myself. So shame he didn't. But he learned his lesson, I think, for the next day because he did all right there and managed a solid recovery. And as I say, we'll get to with the championship zone later, hasn't impacted him too much, but not a risk that you want to be taking too often.
No, exactly. I definitely think it's, I don't know. Sometimes I just sit there and go, these are super entertaining, but you're right, this one did just lack a little bit of luster. And then we went straight back in round five to having Larson win again. And
And so he heard your
obviously,
complaints from afar 2 weeks after the fact and was like, yeah, no, I'm feeling this from the future. Nabila's going to be annoyed at me. I've got to win this race tomorrow.
yeah, I think that's exactly it. But it's so funny because I always sit here and I'm like, I've always been pretty excited. I really have. Like,
Mm.
we've always gone, like, it was great. Like, this happened, this happened. But even with that little thing off, like, on the bank and that issue before, and
And
I
so
don't
that was the
know,
most
it
exciting
just
bit for the weekend
lacked.
for Group E for me because, like I was saying to you before we started recording, I was making the notes as going along. Races are fine. I mean, Pastrana top qualifier, Larson and Pastrana doing their thing, Connell and Kevin Eriksson winning the last chance qualifiers. Like, okay, this is nice. They got a nice jump it up finale. Janssen has made the jump into Group E. That should be interesting to watch as well, and it was. But it, again, he was quite impressive overall for the weekend, being able to jump
Yeah.
between two categories. But like you say, it just lacked a little bit of something. There was some door bashing. There was a little bit of hit and miss stuff, but overall, you were just like, well, that's that done.
Hmm. Pretty much.
And you're
And
like,
that leads
I
us,
wish I could say something else, but there
I
isn't.
know, that kind of ties us nicely into the points. And by the way, it's not the Ericsson brother I expected on the top. Not gonna lie to you.
Yeah.
When you said, "Oh, you don't have to worry," he's seventh.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Kevin earlier. Never mind. Wow, that ain't like milk.
So we don't have Oliver Ericsson, as I thought. That was where my brain was going when I was talking about the Ericsson brother. It's Kevin Ericsson who's leading this championship right
50-50.
now with 325 points, and very, very, very close behind the 1 point difference, Robin Larson. So I
Which I think
wonder,
is pretty
is
impressive considering how these point system works, as we've just been talking about. The fact that all of that and you've got 1 point in it, I don't know how that's happened.
I don't know either, because I don't know how the points are allocated. Like, okay, you get 15 for the top
Whole, essentially.
qualifier, but what do you get for the win? Like
I
100?
think I might have that
Is
written
that how
somewhere,
we're at
but it's not
325?
clear. Yeah, no, I need to find out. Maybe
That's right.
I'll
But
have
yeah,
there'll be a solo podcast of like 4 hours of me just trying to work out the maths by hand. It's not going to do very well
oh
on
God.
popularity, and it's going to be terrible to listen to on Spotify. But maybe we can get some kind of steeping playlist out of it instead. Listen to Thiemo do maths.
Yeah, but so we've got Kevin, Robin, and Andreas Backward.
Yeah, that's
Top
the top
three.
three, which is a little bit of a
Yeah.
golf then, about 44 points off roughly to Larson
Mm-hmm.
there. And Connor Daly, who is rounding out the top eight, 97 points. We've not seen him this time around. I'm not sure where he went. I thought he was sticking around for a while. But again, I think that's the problem with some of the news that we were talking about. News is announced, but isn't announced completely to everyone. And we're like, oh, where is this person? Because again, we know about Bennett not being there. He said, yeah, I'm not going to be there because I'm not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone else, you're like, oh, I don't know where this person's gone. I can't tell you. So need to get more news feed out of Nitrocross officially, I think, there. And so that was the other interesting thing, actually. I just wanted to mention quickly on the broadcast, the fact they were kept saying about how great the paddock was and everything, and all the stuff that you could do in there and all this sort of thing. And I think that'd be something that social media would be great at promoting across the weekend, even if you, especially if you're in the area and you're not sure and you want to go see it, and if you're not, you can at least see what you're missing out on. And I don't recall at the time seeing any social media stuff of what was going on in the paddock, really. I mean, Streetback Tommy used to do that. He's not there this season. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems a bit of a shot in the foot there on their part that they're not doing that. And like, yeah, if you showed us, we would be, you don't need to promote it on the broadcast then. And it's a bit late at the broadcast anyway, because the event's already started.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so many tools that social media could almost feel more inclusive for fans and a little bit more streamlined. Just watch small snippets, because sometimes it's really hard to get yourself to sit and watch the whole broadcast. It is long, like there's a lot going on continuously. It's a massive time commitment. Whereas if you've got like those few 15-second wrap-ups in a social media thing,
Yeah.
it's more accessible to people because they know they don't have to sit there and watch the whole thing. They can just go through and like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened.
You have that Family Guy newsreader go, who won this race? Travis. Who didn't win this race? This guy. Okay, cool. Next. Done.
Exactly. Anyway, I don't like, see, we don't like to
Constructively criticize.
Yes, I don't enjoy doing it, but sometimes I'm just like, this is something we've had a problem with since the beginning. And I just really do think it would change the level of fan, because it now isn't a massive time commitment. It is something that like
It's as much or as little as you want, but at the same time,
exactly.
You want to have the incentive to watch the full thing because you want to know that you're missing out on something otherwise. And you don't want to skip through the bits just to the races.
Yeah, I agree with that. And swiftly leading on to my driver of the weekend before I go on a tangent about that, I think it's got to be Leah. As I mentioned before, happy to see her finally being on the podium twice and just not kind of having that bad luck that she has been having. It was just a nice, clean weekend for her, to be fair.
No, totally agree. Great to see it. And yeah, she's going to have an interesting year next year with a lot of things. So I'm glad that at least on this side of things, it's going well for her. So that should give her a bit more confidence than what off-road stuff she does then. As for me, as I mentioned earlier, I was super impressed by Casper Janssen, who was switching between Next and Group E for the entire weekend. First time he's done that, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, just winning everything in Next as per usual. It's kind of, he is the Max Verstappen of that category. But then doing better than potentially we would have thought he would do in Group E category. So pleasant surprise, but very happy to see it.
Oh, absolutely. Nice to see someone coming in against regulars in these cars, because they've been driving them for almost what?
Donkey's years.
15 races now, so if not longer. And great to see him being able to keep up. It doesn't seem to be a step up for him, if that makes sense. Like, absolutely,
Right, natural progression.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was a nice way to see it. But that is all we've got time for on this week's episode. We apologize for being MIA these last few months. Just lots of things happening on other fronts of our life. But we promise
too much
to be
motorsport.
better. Agreed. And I don't know, obviously, coming into the Christmas period, how many more episodes we're going to throw out there, but hopefully we can get you some more driver episodes and content coming out soon.
Yes, very much so. And if you want more from us in the meantime, you know by now, check the show notes for details. And as Nabila said, hopefully we'll be back with some more Nitrocross content in the not too distant. So do check back for that. Thank you very much for listening, and we will hopefully see you again soon.